Georgia elections were plurality votes up until around 1963. And a plurality vote is different from a majority vote because when you have a plurality vote, that means that the person who gets the largest percentage of votes wins the vote, regardless of whether that person receives the majority of votes. So if you look at it as an example, if you look at the Loeffler, Warnock, Collins election, where you had many different candidates, that would essentially be a plurality vote. Warnock received 33% of the vote, so that means that he would have won the election. So in 1963, there was a guy in Georgia. He was in the General Assembly, and he actually had lost an election prior to the office that he held, where his opponent was able to gather enough of the African American vote to put himself ahead of this particular lawmaker. So this lawmaker said, well, I don't want this to happen again later on. And he proposed a majority vote. And the majority vote was essentially, the rule was that you would have to get 50% of the vote plus one vote. And if you didn't get that, then it would run off, you would go to a special election with the top two vote getters. And in that way, he was able to ensure that the African American vote would not be enough to put one of his competitors ahead of him later on in the election. These runoff elections typically have low voter turnout, and that voter turnout usually favors Republicans. Now, we are facing some pretty extraordinary circumstances right now. We have a pandemic going on. So a lot of those people who did absentee voting before had more time to get their absentee ballots and then turn those in than they're going to have in January. It's a very quick turnaround time. So people who went through the process to get those absentee ballots, may not do that this time. The other thing is that there's a lot of election fatigue at this point. Campaigns decide to just simply use this message of, control over the Senate, that may not resonate with all voters. Not everyone's going to understand or care that the Senate is majority Republican or majority Democrat. So really the challenge for both campaigns, both the Democrats and the Republicans, is to tie in what is important to people's lives to what's at stake in the Senate. So for instance, if you can say something like healthcare is at stake, and if we don't elect this particular candidate, then we might not have a chance to make changes in healthcare. I think that will resonate a little bit more with voters than simply, we need control of the Senate. I think Democrats need to continue to keep people motivated, to keep those voters in this race, and to be sure that voter fatigue doesn't set in. I think Republicans need to make sure that their block of voters are not discouraged and that they come out to the polls. Even though Georgia did go blue this particular election, that does not mean that sitting out during the runoff is a good idea, essentially. So I think both parties have challenges moving forward.